Recent Blackrock survey found that Germany represents the largest number of ETF investors in Europe, but other markets are growing fast, like Iberia and the UK. The survey also found that on average, across Europe, of the next wave of ETF investors, 41% will never have invested before. Gen Zs and millennials are emerging as a driving force of growth of the European ETF market, whereas currently ETFs are largely owned by the 35 to 54-year age group. Here to discuss the findings with me is Timo Toenges, Head of Digital Wealth Business at Blackrock. Timo, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So Timo, were these findings as anticipated, or were there some surprises that came from it?
The YouGov research really reinforced some of the emerging trends that we're seeing associated with ETF ownership in Europe. So firstly, the ETF market really has the capacity to grow a lot further. We're expecting over 1 million new ETF investors in Spain and Portugal, and over 800,000 new investors in Italy over the next 12 months. Germany was confirmed as the highest growth market and the market leader, with a potential to add 2 million new ETF investors over the next 12 months. And then secondly, ETF investors are getting younger. The next 12 months are really going to see that shift from investors over the age of 35 to millennials and Gen Z investors becoming the dominant group using ETFs. Put some numbers around that. Currently, the group aged 35 plus represents 63% of ETF owners, but the growth is going to come from that younger group, with 54% being under the age of 35 over the next 12 months. Then lastly, the shift in that age group also means that we're going to have a lot more first-time investors in general using ETFs to start their investing journey. So 41% of the next wave of ETF investors will never have invested before, and that's something we're really excited about.
What do you see as the main factors driving the growth of ETFs in Europe right now?
The biggest driver by far that we see is increased retail adoption. And that's not just in Europe, that's globally. So over the last year, we've seen 40 million new self-directed ETF investors globally. The new investors, they say they feel empowered by the simplicity of digital investing and the convenience of ETFs that goes with it. And across Europe, we're really working with the leading digital platforms to ensure that we're at the forefront of this trend and we can help more Europeans invest for the long term. And another thing that we're seeing is this concept of ETF savings plans, recurring automated investing. That's really becoming ever more popular. So by 2026, we're estimating that 1 in 4 people in Germany are projected to have an ETF savings plan. Currently, that's already close to 5 million Germans that are investing in this way. But it's not just Germany. We've got ETF savings plans live in 12 European countries. Talked about Spain and Italy. They are on a similar growth path to Germany right now. But it's not just the digital attackers that are focusing on ETF savings plans. A lot of banks have plans to launch big ETF savings plans offerings. And over the last year, we've seen a 22% increase in the number of ETF savings plans that we just see with iShares.
Wow, that's impressive. Do you see retrocession fees continuing to be a headwind for growth of ETFs in Europe, or do you see it less relevant for the younger investor group who may be more self-directed?
Look, retrocessions still play a huge role in the European industry and are determining product choice and are also determining how advisors are compensated. So they do play an incredibly important role. But as we said earlier, those first-time investors, those younger investors, actually retrocessions aren't playing that big of a role. They're investing in very different ways to previous generations. They're not going to a bank branch, speaking to an advisor and taking a lot of time to kind of set that relationship up. They take things into their own hands. And in the same way that they would do with exercise or with diet, they go on YouTube, they educate themselves, they build a basic understanding, and then they use those low friction platforms to just get started. And they're actually making quite good choices in that process, using ETFs, using ETF savings plans for their first time investing and stepping into that world in that way.
The industry has done a lot of work around ETF education over the years, but what more can be done to support this investor group?
Yeah, so traditionally, I think we, as well as the rest of the industry, have really thought about designing educational programs and have thought about what end investors and investors in general should know. And I think that's really shifting right now, again, also driven by some of these new platforms that we're seeing out there. And it's much more, what do investors need to know at what stage of their investing journey? So just to give you an example, reading about the different types of orders and order types is probably not something an end investor would be interested in until they actually place an order. And placing that bite-sized content at that point is one of the examples of how education and how we're thinking about education is changing. I think the two most exciting areas for further education is actually fixed income. We still see a huge bias towards equities and equity ETFs with end investors. So there's definitely a need there. And then this idea of the whole portfolio or a multi-asset approach to investing and how you balance some of those things. I think that's another area where the industry can do more to educate end investors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Timo, thanks so much for your insights. And for everybody, thanks for watching.